They thought we were animals. When the Zarn arrived, tall and plated in silver flesh with voices like grinding stone, they didn't declare war. No, they assigned Earth a value, resource planet, Tier 4, and began stripping it like a rusted car in a junkyard. They barely noticed us, just tagged us as low-threat primates, posted a couple of sentry drones, and moved on with their conquest. We begged, at first, broadcasted peace talks, gestures, offers to collaborate, trade. They didn't respond. One of their translators eventually cracked and told us what they called us. Flesh angst. Said we burned too fast, too bright, too emotionally volatile to ever be considered evolved. We didn't even make the list of enslavable races. We were simply ignored. But they made one mistake. They killed my brother, and I don't let things go. He was a mechanic, not a soldier, not a scientist, just some poor bastard who got caught near a drill site when a Zarn war machine collapsed a mountain. They didn't even realize he was there, just another soft skin in the dirt. But I found his body, crushed under steel and dust, still holding a wrench, and something in me snapped. You see, they misjudged us. We don't organize like them. We don't follow hive commands or operate through mental links. We don't need telepathy or symbiosis. We operate on pure, unfiltered rage. Give one of us a reason, a cause, or a grave to mourn, and we become something else. I started small, hit a drone tower with a rigged EMP bomb I built from scrap microwave parts and copper wiring. It fried the bastards and blacked out half their scanners across Sector 12. They didn't notice. They thought it was weather. So I hit another. Then another. Then I found others like me, men who'd lost wives, sons, entire towns to Zarn mining drills and incidental extraction. They weren't soldiers either. They were welders, truck drivers, farmers, angry men, angry enough to do something stupid, which turned out to be exactly what was needed. We called ourselves the Burned. Not because we wanted revenge. No, because we'd already accepted the loss. Our homes were ash, our futures gone. We weren't fighting for survival. We were fighting to hurt them back. The Zarn finally noticed when we hijacked one of their supply cruisers, crashed it straight into a fuel processor, and turned their sky refinery into a fireball that lit up 3 countries. It killed 200 of their kind, a massacre by their standards. That's when we learned something else. They weren't invincible. They weren't fearless. They were just used to winning. Now they saw what we really were, not weak, not primitive, but furious. And fury is contagious, especially among men who've lost everything. There were no uniforms, no orders, just packs of broken men spread across wastelands, deserts, ruins, hiding in shadows and fire. We fought dirty. We made bombs out of coffee machines, bullets out of rusted pipe. We didn't care about rules. We cared about pain. Theirs. They labeled us disruptive anomalies, tried to clean us out with flamethrowers and sonic waves, but they didn't understand that for every one of us they burned, 3 more picked up the ashes and made knives from the rubble. We were no longer trying to win. We were trying to make them bleed, and bleeding they did. The funny thing is, they still think they're the superior species. But let me tell you something. If superiority means being calm, reasonable, calculated, then yeah, we're the bottom of the chain. But if it comes down to who's willing to burn the whole galaxy just to make you pay, we're apex predators. And they have no idea what they've awakened. The crash was supposed to be the end of us. When we took down that refinery cruiser, it was all or nothing. Half of us didn't think we'd live past the blast. We figured maybe we'd be remembered by someone, somehow, as the men who threw a punch in a fight we weren't supposed to survive. But we didn't die. Most of us walked away with melted skin, broken bones, coughing black smoke out of our lungs. We had no med bays, just bandages, whiskey, and old-world painkillers stolen from crumbled pharmacies. Some of us went mad from the burns, screaming through the night. But we didn't stop. Something happened after that explosion. Something the Zarn didn't account for. Fear. Not ours. Theirs. The Zarn don't do chaos well. They function like gears in a well-oiled engine. Each one knows its role, speaks in frequencies, obeys without hesitation. Order is their religion. Logic is their god. Emotion? That's weakness. So when chaos erupted, unplanned, unscripted, human-born, they didn't know how to react. They threw protocol at it, algorithms, behavioral analysts. They even tried peace transmissions. They offered to relocate us to another continent if we ceased aggression. Relocate? We laughed. What continent? The land was scorched, oceans black with oil, forests turned into resource pits, cities caved in by drills the size of skyscrapers. The only thing left was wreckage and anger. They were offering us space in a graveyard they made. That's when it started to change. We weren't just reacting anymore. We began to hunt. My crew, the Burned, started mapping their movements. We learned their patrol times, their flight paths, their supply drops. We'd pull out old satellite prints, update them by watching the skies for hours, days even, drawing circles in dirt, using sticks and bottle caps to mimic troop carriers. We used to be ordinary men. Now we were wolves in the ruins, tracking our prey with obsession. Our first real strike was at Tower 47, a command relay hub. They used it to manage 4 surrounding resource zones. Probably didn't think anyone could breach it. After all, it was lined with pulse grids, mech sentries, and a trio of ground-to-air turrets. We had none of that. Just fire. We came at night, not with rifles, not with bombs, with Molotovs, ropes, and a stolen welding torch. We scaled the north face of the tower while their drones flew blind in the windstorm we timed for that night. The Zarn don't like atmospheric interference. They lose stability. Their optics blur. We used that. I still remember the first scream, if you could call it that. A gurgling metallic wail as we set fire to their central access port. One of them tried to retreat, but we had rigged the stairwell with broken rebar and buried nails. It stumbled, fell, and we were on it before it could chirp a distress signal. Do you know what a Zarn bleeds? Something like tar mixed with static, hot and bitter smelling. It hissed as it hit the concrete. I'd never felt so alive. They sent reinforcements the next day, but by then we were ghosts again, already miles away. But we left something behind. A symbol. It was crude. Just a jagged X scorched into the metal wall with a fuel torch. But it shook them. Because it meant something had marked them. Something chaotic. Something human. Other crews started copying it. Some used spray paint. Some carved it with knives into their armor. Every Zarn patrol hit by human retaliation ended with an XA calling card. That's when they started documenting us. We found one of their field guides in the wreckage of a destroyed cruiser. Translated, it read, "Human resistance cells, burned type, high volatility aggressors, behavior, non-unified, motivations, grief, anger, vengeance, methods, improvised warfare, psychological disruption, non-tactical engagement, high-risk encounters, avoid unless necessary." Avoid unless necessary. That's when we knew we weren't just anomalies. We were becoming their threat level red. They tried to regroup, reassert control. They set curfews, launched orbital scans. But we kept striking. We'd sabotage their harvesters, reroute their water lines with old plumbing hacks, overload their solar tanks. Anything to disrupt, confuse, bleed. The best moment came when they tried to bait us. They set up a mock hospital, dangled it like bait in Sector 6, made it look like a refuge, lit up with false human beacons and medicine. They wanted to lure in survivors, rebels, desperate people. We knew it was fake, but we went anyway. Not for help, for war. 20 of us went in. Only 12 came back. But we brought the whole tower down behind us, melted their steel framework with homemade acid bombs, packed the halls with broken propane tanks, and lit it up with a flare. The explosion lit the sky for 100 miles. We weren't just the burned anymore. We were becoming the reckoning. And men started joining us from every corner. Old soldiers who'd sworn never to fight again, teachers, miners. One guy was a blind vet who made detonators by touch. Said he couldn't see anymore, but he could still feel the hate. I believed him. Some came broken, addicted, numb, half mad from grief. But that didn't matter. We weren't looking for heroes. We were looking for men who had nothing to lose. Because that's the secret the Zarn never figured out. They thought evolution was about efficiency, clean lines, smooth logic. But survival? That's a different beast. Survival is ugly. It crawls. It rips. It adapts through sheer refusal to die. And anger survives everything. We kept pressing, took over a whole underground bunker in the dead zone, built a base there, wired old comms, patched together gear from junk, mapped the enemy with stolen tech. We even started crafting new weapons, old world style, repeating shotguns, rail spike launchers, sound cannons built from collapsed stadium speakers. We weren't polished, but we were getting smart. The Zarn tried to flatten us after the hospital trap, sent a swarm of aerial shredders to smoke out the bunkers. They never expected us to shoot one out of the sky with a modified tree harvester-turned cannon. The thing fell like a meteor, took out 1/3 of their air control in the region. They didn't send drones after that. They sent specialists, Zarn Prime elites, tall, white-armored, scythes for arms, fast, too fast. They killed 4 of ours in less than a minute the first time we met one. But we learned. We lured the next one into a mine shaft, let it chase one of our scouts, then dropped 2 tons of rock on it. When we dug it out, we didn't find a body. We found a data core, and that's when the war really changed. Because in that core, we found something they didn't want us to see. They were scared of us, not just as rebels, not just as a nuisance. They were scared of our rage. The data logs showed early projections, calculations. Human emotional irregularity was once tagged as a Class 5 containment risk, too unpredictable for integration, too volatile for containment. They decided to mine around us, hoping we'd fade, burn out, or kill ourselves off. Instead, we evolved. Not in tech, not in biology, in fury. We learned to weaponize it, to feed off it, and to share it. The burned weren't just a crew anymore. We were a movement. Across the ruins, in the last corners of broken cities, men began carving the X into stone, into steel, into skin. Some burned it into their chests. Others wore it on black flags, flown high above shattered rooftops. We became a rumor. The Zarn had always seen us as weak. Turns out, weak is just a word for someone who hasn't been pushed too far yet. And now, we weren't the weakest. We were the most dangerous. Because when you take away a man's future, his family, his home, his purpose, he either dies or he becomes something you should have never effed with. They thought anger would die out, that it would burn like a house fire, fierce, loud, but short-lived. They never imagined it could spread like a virus, that it could catch in the bones of men across oceans, that grief and fury could network across broken radio waves, whispered from survivor to survivor like a prayer with no God. But it did. After we cracked the Zarn's data core, the information spilled out like blood from a broken skull. We decrypted it slowly, using old-world rigs and makeshift translators. And what we found wasn't just battlefield data. It was fear. Real, systemic fear. In the Zarn language, there's no word for vengeance. No structure to describe retaliation for pain. Their minds aren't wired to understand that kind of emotion. not rage for its own sake. They think in cycles, outcomes, logic. They think of war as mathematical optimization. We were the first variable they couldn't solve. Their assessments called our rage non-sustainable. Their predictions expected human resistance to collapse within 4 Earth months due to lack of resources, internal conflict, and psychological deterioration. But here we were. Month 9. Still fighting. Still evolving. Still angry. More of us were rising every week. In the frost-ridden Russian wastelands, entire mining crews turned their drills into spike launchers. In the scorched African plains, water-seekers formed ambush militias, riding salvaged bikes and wielding solar blades. We got transmissions from what used to be Brazil, a whole jungle resistance that lived in the roots of collapsed cities, poisoning Zarn fuel lines with plant toxins. And it wasn't just men with guns, it was men with purpose. Some were former engineers reverse-wiring their old factories to spit out weapons. Some were hackers, once useless in this analog war, who figured out how to crash Zarn drones using single-line overloads. One guy in Alaska learned how to mimic their distress signals and lured 5 Zarn patrols into an avalanche. It didn't matter where you were born, what flag you used to salute, what language you spoke. The new anthem of Earth was rage. But the Zarn still didn't get it. Not really. So we decided to teach them. It started with Project Vulture. We couldn't outgun them, but we could outthink them. A former chemist from Toronto, a quiet man who'd lost both sons in a refinery collapse, came to us with a plan. "We can poison their air," he said, voice flat, eyes hollow. "Their filtration systems are reactive, not adaptive. They don't expect chemical chaos." So we built it. Crude dispersal bombs, filled with neurocorrosive mist made from industrial waste, rotting biomatter, and synthetic acids. It was hell in a can, and it bypassed every Zarn filter we knew of. We dropped the first one into a drone nest outside Morocco. 12 Zarn units melted in under 2 minutes, their armor turned to bubbling sludge. The shrieks that came out of that hive didn't sound alien. They sounded human, panicked. We used their own tactics against them, played recordings of Zarn screams across frequencies they used for navigation, disrupted their balance, their orders, their confidence. And then we made sure they knew who did it. Every time we struck, we left a message, scrawled into metal, burned into walls. "We remember." 3 words, that's all. But it cut deeper than fire. Because they didn't remember, not really. Their species didn't mourn, didn't hold funerals, didn't build statues or write names on walls. To them, loss was just data corruption, replaceable, forgettable. To us? Loss is fuel. They tried to adapt, launched their silencer squads, genetically enhanced Zarn, bred for urban suppression and psychological intimidation. Black armor, no faces, tall as 2 men stacked. But it didn't work. Not because they weren't deadly. They were. They took out whole camps in single-night raids. But they talked. One survivor, a 15-year-old boy who used to be mute after losing his entire village, came back with a bloodied crowbar and a recorded voice log from the squad leader. And what did it say? "Subject humans display irrational resistance, attempting intimidation protocol, ineffective. Their response to threat levels is not retreat, it is escalation, it is illogical." That kid is a legend now. They call him Crowbar, no last name, no home, just rage and a voice that came back the day he split open a Zarn elite's skull. But the truth? It wasn't just kids or rebels or soldiers anymore. Even civilians turned violent. There's an old saying, you push a man too far, he breaks. The Zarn forgot the other part. Some men don't break. They sharpen. Like Ellis, the garbage man from what used to be Houston, never fired a gun in his life, lost his leg in a drone sweep, refused to stop working. Now he drives a rig loaded with barrels of flammable waste and slams it into Zarn convoys. The others call him Junk God. Or Mateo, the old priest who buried his entire church after a Zarn seismic extractor crushed it. Now he blesses every bullet with a whisper and leads night ambushes with nothing but a sword and an oxygen mask. They say he doesn't blink when he kills. These aren't heroes. They're men with no lines left to cross. We kept rising. Across continents. Across language barriers. Fury doesn't need translation. It just needs a reason. And the Zarn had given us plenty. But then something strange happened. We intercepted a message. Deep level, encrypted, not meant for Earthside units. Took us 3 weeks to crack it. And when we did, it changed everything. Because it wasn't about us. It was about them. Their home world. Turns out Earth isn't the only place where rebellion burns. Other races, ones the Zarn conquered centuries ago, had begun to stir. Tiny flickers. Isolated incidents. But after what we did? Those flickers turned to wildfire. We weren't just an anomaly anymore. We were a symbol. Other species began carving the X into their cities. The same mark we left on towers and walls. Some began chanting our name, or what passed for it in their tongues. Burned. They didn't know us, had never met us. But they saw what we did. We weren't the weakest. We were the loudest. We were the ones who made the gods bleed. And that made us dangerous. Not just to the Zarn, to everyone. But here's the thing. We didn't ask for followers. We didn't want an alliance. We weren't fighting for some noble galactic cause. We were fighting because our bones remembered the fire. Because every time we slept, we saw the faces of the ones we lost. Because men like me don't forgive. We carry it. The Zarn called us contagious. They were right. Anger is contagious. Especially when it's justified. Especially when it's human. And for the first time in their existence, they weren't dealing with a broken species begging for mercy. They were facing billions of angry men. Some with guns. Some with knives. Some with nothing but fists and scars and stories. But all of them ready to fight until the stars turned black. We weren't fighting for peace. We were fighting to make the ones who started this choke on their own fear. And that was only the beginning. It was never part of the plan to leave Earth. Our war was here. Our ghosts lived in the soil, in the ash, in the wreckage of cities and fields that used to mean something. Every crater, every ruined street was a reminder, and reminders kept us sharp. But when we cracked the Zarn command logs from that downed elite squad, we found something we weren't supposed to. A location. Not coordinates on Earth. A gate. It was buried deep under what used to be Iceland. A subcrust facility hidden beneath a frozen geothermal vent. We only found it because a dead Zarn's black box recorded an anomaly in the magnetic field during their descent. It wasn't a base. It was a launch point. A tether. They called it Echelon Gate 3, an off-world transport line. Not visible from orbit. Not active all the time. Only triggered under specific command sequences. We didn't know where it went, but we knew one thing. Wherever it led, there were more of them. And that was enough. Only 7 of us volunteered. No one forced it. No one begged. You either stepped forward or you didn't. I did. So did Rig, a former firefighter who hadn't spoken a word since his crew burned alive in Sector 17. He just stared at the gate diagram and nodded. Then there was Briggs, ex-Special Forces, face held together with wires and willpower. He wanted to die somewhere that mattered. He said it straight. I got nothing left on this planet but corpses and rust. Might as well piss on theirs. The others were like us, burned men, hollowed out and rebuilt by pain. We didn't have uniforms, just scars and makeshift gear, armor forged from scrap, knives sharpened from broken car frames, rebreathers hacked from old oxygen tanks. We went in expecting death. We found something worse. The gate opened with a scream, not mechanical, organic, like a thing alive but broken, pulled open against its will. Light poured out like liquid heat, warping the ground around it. We stepped through without speaking, just clenched fists and gritted teeth. When we landed, we weren't in another world. We were in a holding cell, a massive chamber, stone, not steel, lit with hanging veins of glowing material that pulsed like blood. The air was thicker, colder, and we were not alone. They were watching us. Zarn. Dozens, standing in balconies overhead, tall and motionless, eyes like pale fire. No weapons drawn, just observing, as if they didn't see us as a threat. Just a curiosity? Briggs laughed. Good. Let's give them something to fucking study. We opened fire, but the bullets froze mid-air, caught in some kind of stasis field. Not slowed, stopped, then shattered like glass. The Zarn didn't react. One of them, robed in black, floated down toward us. Not walked, floated. He spoke through vibration, not words. But we heard him anyway. You burn so bright, but for what purpose? I stepped forward. Because you took everything. He tilted his head. We took nothing. You gave it up. When you surrendered your species' sovereignty for safety, for progress, we simply accepted your offer. I froze. What offer? He didn't answer, just turned his hand, and the wall behind us lit up. A video played, not of war, of negotiation. It was a room, clean, intact, governmental, and sitting there were faces we recognized, men in suits, presidents, generals, CEOs, shaking hands, with Zarn envoys, not under threat, but in agreement. The Zarn voice hummed again. Your leaders were not conquered. They were compensated. Access to the stars, genetic enhancement, immunity from resource loss. In exchange, they gave us the world beneath the common man. My stomach turned. It was a deal. We weren't victims of invasion. We were the collateral damage of a transaction. Every town crushed, every child buried, every family lost. It wasn't a miscalculation. It was part of the cost. I turned to Briggs. His face had gone stone cold. They sold us, he whispered. They fucking sold us out. Rig screamed. He didn't say a word. He just screamed, rage bubbling out like magma. He ran at the floating Zarn, knife drawn. He didn't make it. A pulse of sound knocked him backwards, slamming him into the wall so hard his spine snapped. He died with his mouth open, still screaming. That was when something in me snapped again. Not like before, not the wild, red rage of loss. This was cold, sharp, final. They didn't conquer us. They manipulated us, let us rot in our cities, die in their minds, tear each other apart, all while our own leaders cashed the checks. And the Zarn? They watched, studied, amused. We were the ants. They were the boot. But now, the ants had learned to bite back. We escaped not by force, but by corruption. Briggs hacked the stasis field by overloading his neural implant, fried himself in the process, his final move, his final middle finger to the ones who bought his soul. We made it back through the gate with one less man and more fury than ever. Back on Earth, the truth spread faster than fire. The footage, the deal, the betrayal. Every man who still believed this was a fight for survival saw it for what it was now. A betrayal by their own kind. And something worse happened. We stopped trusting each other. Every survivor, every leader, every signal caller, anyone who used to work for a government, a corporation, a system, was now suspect. The burned fractured. We weren't one fire anymore. We were a wildfire. Every city-state had its own response. Some demanded justice, real justice, to hunt down the collaborators, the ones who signed our death warrants. Others wanted to scorch everything, every piece of technology, every satellite, every remnant of the old world. And some wanted to go after the families of the ones who sold us out. The rage wasn't pure anymore. It had mutated into hatred. And I stood in the middle of it all, wondering if we'd become exactly what they expected. Not rebels, but animals. Fighting over bones while the real enemy watched from above, amused at how easily we turned on each other. But then I remembered something Rig said once, before he died. They think they're above us, not just physically, morally, like they're some evolved species that moved past pain, past hate, that they're cleaner than us, better. He looked me in the eye that day, his voice low and tired. But they don't get it. Clean doesn't win wars. Hate does. And he was right. We couldn't clean up this war. We had to finish it. So I sent one message out, across every human frequency left. No flags, no borders, no names, just 3 words. Burn it all. The collaborators, the strongholds, the Zarn relay towers still standing, everything. Because now we knew what we were, not a resistance, not an army, not a nation. We were the reckoning for 2 species at once, the aliens who broke us, and the humans who let them. We used to think the Zarn were our greatest enemy. We were wrong. The enemy didn't speak in vibrations or pilot war machines. It didn't hover above Earth in cold silence. The true enemy wore our faces. When the footage spread, of the handshakes, the contracts, the deal, the world changed overnight. Fury turned inward. Every city that still stood, every underground bunker, every rebel cell, every survivor's camp, they all started looking at each other different. Were you in on it? That question started wars. Small ones at first, fistfights, accusations, interrogations. Then came the purges. The burned, my brothers, the ones who'd stood with me in blood and fire, began dividing. Some, like me, believed in full eradication of the old world. No exceptions. If your hands ever touched the old systems, the old government, the old networks, you were done. Others wanted trials, justice, proof before punishment. Those men died first, because proof had become irrelevant. Pain was proof. Loss was proof. If you had survived the early days in a cushy bunker, or if your home was left untouched while others burned, if your name was found on a clearance list, you were guilty, even if you didn't know why. And we hunted you. It started with Counselor Dean, a former logistics officer for the Global Relief Coalition. He'd surfaced in the rubble of old New York, hiding behind a few loyal guards, still dressed in a blue jacket, still holding on to a portable screen as if that meant anything now. He begged when we dragged him out. I didn't know the details. I was told it was a humanitarian accord. I was just following orders. We didn't even respond. We tied him to the remains of a collapsed bridge and left him for the wolves, not the animals, but the human ones, the ones with no teeth left except the knives they held. The screams lasted 2 nights. That became the new law of Earth. Not written, not spoken. Survive long enough, and you get judged. Some said it was wrong, that we'd lost our way, that vengeance without structure was no better than the Zarn's mechanical order. I didn't care. Order gave us death. This gave us purpose. The purges swept the globe. The names came in from old archives, recovered servers, and black box logs we'd stolen from crashed Zarn transports, lists of people who had negotiated safe zones, who'd bought immunity with blood, who'd let their cities fall while theirs were spared, mayors, CEOS defense advisors, board members of pre-invasion megacorps. We found them. We pulled them out of the holes they were hiding in, and we burned them. Some begged, some lied, some tried to fight. None of it mattered. We'd become machines in our own right, machines of vengeance, no flags, no mercy, just a shared belief. They gave us up. Now they go first, but that rage, that clarity, it didn't last forever, because one day the sky spoke, not thunder, not storm, but a signal, loud, raw, in every frequency we used. A voice, robotic, deep, emotionless, but unmistakably Zarn. Phase Omega initiated. Human resistance exceeded threshold. Global termination protocol authorized. 12 days to extermination launch. 12 days. That was all we had left. Not to survive. We were past that. To strike back. 12 days until they rained something down on us. Something we wouldn't walk away from. And the worst part? We couldn't reach them. Their orbital defenses were too strong. Every satellite gun, every drone pod, every atmosphere lock was locked tighter than anything we'd ever faced. So we had one option. The gate. Echelon Gate 3, the same one we had come back from. It hadn't been used since we fled the Zarn observation world. We'd buried it under rubble, welded its access panels shut, and written "Do not open" in 7 languages across the walls. But now there was no choice. If we were going to end this war, we had to take it to them. Not just their outposts, not their harvest ships. We had to go to the source, their home world, and destroy it. We called the mission Ashfall. Only 10 of us were chosen. 10 of the worst, the most broken, the most dangerous men Earth had left. Not heroes, not leaders, just executioners. I was one of them. We packed nothing sentimental. No relics, no pictures, nothing to remember Earth by, because we knew we weren't coming back. Each man carried one thing, a small sealed capsule. Inside it, a micro-fusion core, unstable, volatile, weaponized with re-engineered Zarn tech. Enough to detonate half a continent if placed at the right power node. We didn't want to defeat them. We wanted to erase them. We stepped through the gate not as soldiers, but as ghosts with bombs. And what we found on the other side was beautiful. Not in the way you'd expect. Their world wasn't a fortress, not all metal and machines. It was serene. Glass towers stretched into a purple sky. Wind floated through crystal gardens. Waterfalls poured into levitating lakes. Their cities were carved into canyons, spiraling up like vines made of light. It wasn't a war world. It was a sanctuary. And that's when it hit us. They hadn't just escaped rage. They had sheltered themselves from it. They fought their wars with drones, with commands. They never got their hands dirty. They hadn't lost children to fire or wives to crushing debris. They hadn't bled or buried or screamed. They were untouched. And we were the infection they tried to contain. Now we were in the heart of it. We moved silent, cutting through towers like rats in a palace. They didn't expect us. Not here, not in paradise. The first explosion lit up half their skyline, then the second, then a third. We split up, planting the cores in key infrastructure, energy fields, transport hubs, communication spires. Every time one blew, their voices filled the air, confused, panicked, afraid. We'd brought war to their heaven, and they didn't know what to do with it. One of them, a Zarn youth, I think, crawled from rubble, half his limbs gone. He looked up at me, no malice in his eyes, just shock. "You burn for nothing." I leaned down, met his eye. "Number we burn for everything you took." Then I lit the charge. But this story doesn't end with us standing victorious. There was a cost, the final core, the one wired to their central planetary relay, required manual activation. No timer, no remote. Someone had to stay behind. We all knew it going in. I volunteered. Not because I was brave, not because I wanted to be remembered, but because I didn't want to live in a universe where this war still existed. So I stayed. As my brothers fled to the extraction gate, I sat by the humming core and looked out across their perfect city, now shattered and burning, glowing red against the glass sky. It was beautiful, because it was finally real. I pressed the trigger, and I smiled. We thought we ended it, when the final core exploded and their homeworld lit up like a dying sun. We thought it was over. We watched the screens back on Earth as the Zarn relay network went dark, one node after another, silenced like candles snuffed in the void. The skies cleared. The drones stopped. No more voice signals, no more extermination countdown. Just silence. The survivors across the world poured into the streets. For the first time in years, they looked up at the sky and didn't flinch. I wasn't there. I had stayed behind. My name should have died with the blast. But something went wrong. They say when the core went off, it created more than an explosion. It fractured something. Not just space. Not just the relay system. Reality. They pulled me out of the wreckage 4 days later. I don't know how. One of the burned teams, scavenging for tech, found me lying in the crater that used to be the Zarn central spire. Still breathing. Still intact. But different. At first, I didn't notice it. The medics said my vitals were unstable. My body temperature was colder than it should have been. My skin had healed too fast. My voice, deeper, with a slight echo. I chalked it up to trauma, radiation, maybe adrenaline. Then came the dreams. Or maybe they weren't dreams. Visions of crystal towers, flashes of light not born from suns, voices that didn't speak in words, but in understanding. I'd brought the war to their core. But it had changed me. The others noticed, too. When I returned to Earth, the first man who saw me dropped to his knees, called me something I didn't understand. Ascended. He wasn't alone. In the weeks that followed, others came. Not to fight, not to challenge, to worship. They believed I had become something else, a bridge between rage and purpose, that I had touched the heart of the enemy and survived it, that I had absorbed what they could never destroy. It wasn't just insanity. I could feel it. My mind, sharper. I remembered things I shouldn't. Tactical data, planetary grids, languages I never learned. I could hear radio signals before they played. I could walk through fire and feel nothing. I tried to hide it at first, but it was too late. I had become the symbol of everything we were fighting for, and against. And that's when the Second War began. Not with the Zarn, but with ourselves. You see, we thought the Zarn were extinct. We were wrong. They didn't all live on that paradise planet. That was just their nerve center, their sacred home. But the ones who truly ruled, the ones who built the networks, they lived in the void rings, hidden structures beyond star systems, orbiting in dark space, feeding off energy anomalies and entropy itself. We didn't know they were alive. Now we did. They weren't like the Zarn we fought. They didn't walk, they didn't speak, they existed, and the moment we destroyed their core world, they woke up. They didn't send drones. They didn't send ships. They sent a signal, and that signal changed us. Not all of us, just the ones like me, the ones who had touched the heart of Zarn energy and come back. We began to hear it in our bones, a low vibration, like a heartbeat behind walls. It didn't command. It didn't demand. It welcomed. I resisted. Others didn't. Across the globe, men who had walked too close to the fire, who had stood in the ruins of Zarntech, inhaled the dust of shattered alien spires. They began to shift. Physically, they were still human. But something underneath wasn't. We called them the Grade, not because their skin changed, though it often paled, not because their eyes took on a strange metallic hue, but because their morality faded. They weren't angry anymore. They were calm, too calm. They spoke in riddles, claimed they had seen beyond the flame, that we were clinging to primitive rage while a higher understanding waited. They said things like, anger is a step, not a purpose. The void does not destroy, it refines. They began to build structures, not homes, not weapons, spires, just like the ones the Zarn had. Only now, powered by both alien tech and human will. We didn't understand what they were doing at first. We thought it was just madness. Then the skies changed again. One night, all across the world, people reported the same thing. Lights, vertical beams of purple and white piercing the clouds, humming softly, pulling something out of the air. We called them ascension columns. And when we stormed one, we found no weapons, just people, standing, arms raised, eyes closed, changing. We burned the tower, but not all of them. Too many had been built, too fast, too quiet. The burned split again. Half of us wanted to crush the Grade, end this mutation before it spread. The other half? They weren't so sure. Some even joined them. They said maybe this was the next step. Maybe the only way to beat the Zarn wasn't to destroy them. It was to become something they feared. Something they never understood. A blend of fury and clarity. Fire and void. I tried to stay neutral, but neutrality dies fast in a war like this. The Grade came for me. They didn't attack. They asked. "We know what you are," their leader said. "A man I once fought beside. A man I buried twice before he came back. Different. You're the first. You're the bridge. The Zarn couldn't destroy you because part of them recognized something familiar. You're not their enemy. You're their evolution." I said nothing. So he tried again. "Let go of rage. Let go of the burned. There is no need to keep bleeding. The void has room for us all." That's when I realized something terrifying. The Zarn never wanted to destroy humanity. They wanted to cleanse it, to strip it down until only the obedient, the emotionally neutral, the logically driven remained. The Grade were their answer. A mutation, a merging, an infection wearing peace like a crown. I killed him. The Grade leader. Put a steel spike through his chest and watched his eyes go dark. Not with anger, but with disappointment. They haven't stopped coming since. They want me, not to kill me, but to claim me, because I'm the first, the one who walked into Zarn fire and came out, changed but unbroken. To them, I'm not a soldier. I'm a blueprint, but I won't give them what they want, because I still remember. I remember my brother. I remember the screams, the ash, the betrayal, and I remember what rage felt like before it was taken from me. So if this is the second war, then let it begin, not between human and alien, but between those who remember the pain and those who think peace is worth forgetting it. It started with smoke again. Not alien tech, not psychic beams, just old-fashioned black smoke, thick and choking, rising over what used to be the Appalachian spine, now a makeshift city called Crucible, the last known stronghold of the burned. I watched it from a cliff, wind biting my face, gun slung across my back. Crucible was burning, not from attack, but from within. The Grade had infiltrated. They didn't come with weapons. They came with words, promises, calm voices, soft hands, and eyes that glowed with faint silver light. "It doesn't have to end this way," they whispered. They didn't force anyone. That was the real horror. People chose them. Even burned. Men who'd watched their wives turned to ash, sons swallowed in drone fire, whole towns flattened, some of them folded. Because the Grade offered what the burned couldn't. Peace. Not the illusion of safety behind a gun, not revenge, real, engineered peace. Their blood was still human, their minds wired for calm, their emotions flattened like steel beaten into shape. No rage, no guilt, no grief. They smiled while the world ended. I walked into Crucible that night. Fire on both sides, half of it controlled by the burned, half now glowing under the grade's eerie pale light. And in the middle, her. Lena? She used to run comms for our raids. Tough as nails. Took a laser shard through her stomach and still managed to broadcast evac orders while bleeding out. She was one of us. Now? She stood barefoot on the old courthouse steps, arms raised, eyes blank. "Brothers," she said softly, "we've suffered enough. We've earned peace. The pain can end if you just stop carrying it." I stepped forward. "Put your hands down, Lena." She looked at me like I was a child. "Still clinging to the fire? Haven't you burned long enough?" My hands shook, not from fear, from grief. She was gone. Not physically, not even mentally maybe, but her soul, her fury, had been overwritten, replaced by something synthetic, something designed. "I remember my daughter," I said. "I remember the way she screamed when the ceiling collapsed. I remember trying to dig through fire to reach her. I remember the smell of her hair, burnt and gone. That pain? I carry it. I'll carry it till the day I rot. You call that weakness?" I stepped closer. "I call it honor." That's when the shooting started. It wasn't the grade, and it wasn't the burned. It was someone new. From the shadows behind the courthouse, a third group emerged. Tattered armor, painted masks, weapons built from Zarn scrap and human bone. The Ashmen. I'd heard the rumors. Ex-burned gone rogue. Men who'd been too far gone even for our standards. Killed for pleasure. Used Zarn blood in their rituals. Claimed pain itself was God. And now they'd chosen this moment to crawl out from the pit. They opened fire on both sides. Grade fell silently. Burned screamed, guns drawn too late. It was a massacre. I don't remember how many I killed. I just remember Lena falling. A round straight through her throat. She didn't cry. Just looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Then she was gone. I fought until my arms went numb. My ears rang with the sound of bone-hardened blades scraping steel. The Ashmen didn't speak. They howled, guttural, hungry, unhuman. Crucible fell that night, not to the enemy, to ourselves. 3 factions now ruled Earth. The burned, fueled by pain and memory, the grade, chasing calm assimilation, and now the Ashmen, who fed on suffering like it was sacred. There was no Earth left to save, no cities left to reclaim, just scorched ruins and camps divided by ideology. But me? I stood somewhere in the center of it all, not by choice, but by curse. The man who burned the Zarn core and lived. The man the grade called First Ascended. The man the Ashmen whispered about as the spark that lit the death god's eye. And to the burned, to the last real men who remembered fire for what it was? I was still one of them. But even they looked at me sideways now, like I wasn't quite human anymore. And maybe they were right. My strength kept growing. My reflexes, too fast. I could see in the dark now, hear things others couldn't, smell fear like smoke on the air, and in my sleep, I heard a voice. No words, just a low pulse, like a heartbeat coming from under the earth. It wasn't the Zarn, it wasn't the void, it was older. Something buried long before the war, something waiting. I tried to ignore it. But every time I killed, grade, Ashmen, even defectors, I felt it pulse stronger, like it was feeding off violence, like it wanted us to destroy each other. And I began to wonder, had we ever really won? Or had we just opened a door that should have stayed closed? A month later, I found the answer. A burned scout came back from the Arctic zone, frostbitten, bleeding, delirious. But he had seen it, a structure, not Zarn, not human, something else, hidden under the ice, carved into the planet's crust. Older than our species. And inside, a throne, empty, waiting. I took a team. Just 3 of us. The last men I trusted. We rode old Zarn sledcraft, low altitude, cold resistant. What we found in the snow wasn't a building. It was a temple, covered in carvings. Human shapes, but wrong. Too tall, too thin. No eyes. And at the center, in a chamber lit by crystals the size of cars, the throne, made of bone and metal fused together, built to hold something huge, and sitting in front of it, a single line etched into stone. When the rage consumes all sides, the throne shall be filled. I didn't know what it meant, not then, but I do now. The burned want revenge. The grayed want peace. The ashmen want suffering. But the throne? It doesn't want any of that. It wants us to tear each other apart until nothing is left, until the last living soul steps into the fire willingly, and sits down, and becomes something none of us can stop. That's what this has been about the whole time. Not war, not justice, succession, something ancient, older than our hate, older than Earth itself, something that uses fury, logic, and pain as tools. And now? It's my move. I've killed too much to walk away, but I've seen too much to choose blindly. The burned still fight for honor. The grayed still dream of evolution. The ashmen just want the world to end. And me? I stand at the edge of the throne, staring into the abyss. I haven't sat down. Not yet. But the voice is getting louder. And I'm starting to wonder, am I still angry? Or is something else angry through me? I stood at the foot of the throne for 3 days. Didn't eat, didn't sleep. The others didn't follow me inside. They stayed outside the temple, afraid of what they felt in the walls, the vibrations that weren't sound, the shadows that shifted when you blinked. Only I stayed, because I wasn't like them anymore, not quite burned, not quite grayed, not yet ash. I was something in between, something born in war and tempered in silence, and the throne, it knew, it had been waiting. On the 3rd night I started hearing the voice again. No words, just that low hum, like static over bone, like rage trying to whisper without lips. I didn't respond. It didn't matter. The throne wasn't asking me to listen. It was waiting for me to sit. I looked around the chamber. The carvings showed the same thing, over and over again. 3 fires. 1 red, 1 white, 1 black, each feeding a single source, the throne. I finally understood. This war was never between man and alien. Not really. That was the bait, the distraction, the trigger. The real battle was older, deeper. 3 paths. The burned, men who refused to forget, rage as identity, pain as memory, the grayed, evolution through detachment, emotion stripped away for clarity, the ashmen, raw suffering, chaos, agony without meaning, all of them valid, all of them doomed, because the moment one side wins, they sit on the throne, and the throne doesn't give power. It becomes power. I stood there, gun holstered, hands shaking. I didn't want to be a god, but I couldn't leave it empty, because someone would find it eventually. One of the ashmen would stumble in, blood-drunk and broken, and sit down with fire in his eyes. Or a grayed missionary, too calm to question, too eager to serve. Or worse, one of the burned, drunk on vengeance, blind to everything else. So I sat. Not as a king, as a firebreak. The throne was cold at first. Not stone, not metal. Something else. Something alive. My spine hit the backrest and I felt it. Not pain. Weight. Every death, every scream, every betrayal, every ash-covered mile. It all slammed into me like a tidal wave of memory, I saw every man I'd killed, every woman I'd failed, every child I couldn't save. I saw Rig's body, spine cracked, mouth still open in silent fury. I saw Lena, her eyes silver, begging me to let it go. I saw my brother, face covered in soot, hand reaching for mine under the rubble, just out of reach. I tried to move, but the throne held me. And then it spoke, not in a voice, not in words, in understanding. You are not the first. Images flickered, other thrones, other worlds, burned lands, broken people, always 3 paths, always one throne. This is the cycle, and then the worst part. You may end it, but only if you decide. I didn't want to decide, but it forced me. 3 choices appeared in front of me, not visions. Realities, branching out like roots from the base of the throne. Each one terrifying. The first path, the burned rise. The fire spreads, the rage continues. The Grade are hunted down, the Ashmen are annihilated. Earth becomes a world of scars and scars only. Men teach their sons to never forget, to never forgive, to fight until the bones break. And then keep fighting. There's order, there's strength, but no healing. Just victory built on permanent war. I saw a child born into that world. Eyes already hard, a weapon before he learned to speak. It was hell. But it was just. The second path. The great assimilate emotion is abolished. Peace becomes policy. History is reprogrammed. Pain is archived. Everyone feels nothing. No more war, no more love. Just silence. Cities are rebuilt. Skies cleared, resources balanced. But people move like shadows. No fire in the eyes. No stories passed on. Just progress, hollow and bloodless. I saw a man in that world bury his mother. He didn't cry, he didn't even blink. He just logged it, efficient, safe, dead inside. The third path. The ash spread. The thrones burns. The world collapses. No sides, no rules, no memory, only suffering. Humans become shadows, scavengers, beasts. Murder becomes religion. Pain becomes language. The earth becomes the wound that never heals. I saw a man crucified upside down for smiling, and I heard the Ashmen chanting, "Pain is pure, fire is God." It was chaos, but it was honest. 3 futures, each true, each final, and all the weight sat in my hands. The throne didn't care what I chose. It would survive either way. But I couldn't. Because no matter what I picked, I'd have to kill part of myself to make it real. If I chose the burned, I'd never know peace. If I chose the Grade, I'd have to forget my daughter's name. If I chose the ash, I'd burn the last light in this world. So I did something none of them expected. I chose none. I chose the 4th path, the one not carved into stone, not written in alien data, not handed to me by rage or logic. I stood up, and I broke the throne. I drove my knife into its core, the part beneath the seat, glowing faintly with pulsing red light. It screamed. The whole temple shook. My blood boiled, my bones cracked. But I didn't stop. The throne's power wasn't in its metal. It was in the belief that someone had to rule, and I shattered it. When the final spike of steel cracked through the base, the ground exploded with light. Red, white, black, all colors bleeding into one blinding blast. And then, silence. I woke up in the crater. The throne was gone. The temple, gone. Just ash, but not the same kind as before. Clean ash. The burned stopped fighting. The Grade stopped building. The Ashmen stopped chanting. For the first time in years, Earth was quiet. Not peaceful, not healed, just quiet. The war didn't end because someone won. It ended because someone said no more. I don't know what happens next. I'm still breathing, still walking. Some call me a prophet. Some think I'm a freak. Some want me dead for what I did. But I don't care. Because now, No one sits on the throne. And maybe that's the only way a man like me can live. Not as a leader, not as a killer, just as a reminder that we weren't the weakest species. We were the angriest. And we finally found the strength to stop burning.